Right, folks, it is time for part 4 of this video series on how to use the free open source software Audacity to record, edit, and master your own audiobooks. We're getting into editing here. And we're going to talk about some different ways that we edit. We're going to talk about editing out breath sounds and some other ways that I edit my files. The editing will be done in 2 different videos. This one will give us some of the details, and then the next video is when I'll talk specifically about using filter curve EQ to get rid of certain sounds that we don't want in our editing, because the filter curve part gets a little bit more complex, and I want a separate video for that. So this will be part 1 of our editing videos, part 4 overall of this how-to series. So let's get started. We're in Audacity. We have our file that we've mastered. It sounds really good, except it's not edited. There's going to be lots of sounds in here that we don't want. For instance, you need to decide what you want to do with breath sounds in your audiobooks. Some audiobook producers take out pretty much all the breath sounds. I like to have some breath sounds, but not all. I like to have them at places where it makes sense. Maybe when a character is talking, we're used to hearing breaths in between their sentences, but not as much. We don't need that as much in narration. I like to hear some breaths when there's commas, because that makes sense, even in narration, but not all of them. We don't need breaths every time there's a comma or every time a character has a break in their talking. We need some. The thing is, breaths can sound really loud on recordings. Good microphones tend to pick up every little sound, and breaths just sound too loud. So even when we have breaths in our recordings, if you decide to keep some breaths, which I like to, even when you do that, you want to make them quieter so that it doesn't sound like somebody's taking these gasping breaths in the recording. So I have this method that honestly may feel convoluted to you. It may or may not work for you. It works really well for me. What I do is I take out as many of the breath sounds and other weird noises in between words as I can all at once. And then I add breath sounds back in. And so let me show you what that looks like, and it'll make more sense as we go. First of all, let me show you something. This is a breath sound right here. Breaths usually look like kind of a little mountain, and they're pretty short. They're in these low frequencies usually, unless it's a really loud breath, in which case it's going to be more frequencies, higher and lower. And they're usually a kind of a blue color, maybe with a little bit of pink when we're in spectrogram view, because they're usually pretty quiet. But again, we're going to want to make them even more quiet. So first of all, when I edit, I like to be zoomed out a little bit. You can use these zoom out things. Oops, I just zoomed out. I mean, I like to be zoomed in. This is about where I like it. I actually usually, instead of using the zoom out buttons, I usually pinch on my touchpad. So I get my cursor down here and I pinch it to exactly where I want it to be. I like mine about right. Hang on. Right there is about right for me, where I can see each 1/10 of a second. Each of these are 1/10ths of a second, and that helps me get really precise with my editing. The first step that we're going to do, and this is something you only have to do once, once you have figured out what microphone you're using, you only have to do this step once. If you change microphones, you may need to do it again. We're going to make a file that's entirely a file of room noise. Now, how long do you need this room noise to be? It depends how long your chapters are. My chapters are not usually longer than 30 minutes, but sometimes they are. So I have, I think, like a 40-minute file of room noise. Your chapters may be longer or shorter, but you want a file of room noise that's longer than your longest chapter. And it'll make sense why as we go. So when I'm looking at room noise, basically when you have when you record, there's always a little bit of, really, it's kind of static in the background, but just a hushed static. And that's normal in our world. We're not used to complete lack of noise. And so in a recording, you want this tiny bit of what we call room noise in the background. And rather than just keeping the room noise that's in the file, I take it out as part of my process and then I add it back in. And that's going to make more sense as we go. But I want to look at my file and see if I have a good section, usually at least a few seconds of consistent room noise. Now I'm going to tell you, this is room noise right here. You can see it's just at the very bottom frequency. This here is probably a little breath, but that room noise is just at the very bottom frequency, and it should be consistent. Because of the amount of noise reduction I do during mastering, my room noise probably gets a little too quiet. So if you're like this, I mean, that is not much noise at all. That's why the ACX check told me it actually might be too quiet. The room noise might be too minimal. You might need to record some special room noise. So let me show you what that would look like. Again, I'm not using my regular mic, but for the purposes of this video, this will work fine. I would just go to New, and I would go into my recording space with my mic that I'm using, and I would do several seconds, maybe 10 seconds or so, of me being completely silent. No movement, no talking, no anything, like this. Okay, I've got some room noise here. I'm gonna look at it in the spectrogram view, see if it picked up anything else, any, stomach growls or anything. Actually, this looks really, really consistent. Now, I'm gonna highlight it and see if I see any static here. With my normal mic, I'd probably have a little static. This room noise looks really good. But with my normal mic, it just picks up more than my computer mic does. So I would probably do one round of noise reduction. Command 1, get noise profile, select the whole thing, Command 1, noise reduction. I'm not going to do it right now because, like I said, I'm using my computer mic and it's not picking up very much. It's just not that sensitive. But with my regular mic, I'd probably do that one round of noise reduction, make sure it still looks nice and even. This is about a good amount of room noise that we're looking at. In fact, let's look at ACX check. Command K, -84. That's actually a good level of room noise. In fact, it could be a little bit louder if it needed to be. So -84 is great. It's lower than our -60 that we're going for. This is a good room noise. I would select several seconds, maybe like 5 seconds of it. We want to make sure it's really, really consistent. No little bumps or anything, no louder portions. In fact, that might have been slightly louder there. Let's see. That's 5 good seconds. You could do 2 seconds. You could even do less. And we just want it to be really, really consistent. And here's how we're going to make our room noise track. First, we're going to just copy this. Command C, or you can go to Edit, Copy, okay? And then we're going to use this thing that we have called Punch, Copy, and Punch Paste. Punch, Copy, and Punch Paste allows you to take a sound, a little sound bit, and you put it on this kind of clipboard that it stays on. It stays there until you do another punch copy. And anytime you want to fill up any length of sound with that sound that you copied, so let's say you have like a stomach growl in your file. You can have some room noise or some silence, and that's on your punch copy clipboard. And you can highlight however long that stomach growl was, whether it was a 1/4 second or 3 seconds because you were really hungry. You can highlight however long it was and use punch paste, and it's gonna loop whatever was on that punch copy clipboard to fill up whatever length of time you need to paste. So normally if you copied and pasted, if you copied 1/2 second, it would always paste in 1/2 second. But with punch copy and punch paste, whatever's on the clipboard is going to loop or be trimmed to fit that length of time that you need to paste. So this will make more sense in a minute. We're going to do punch, copy, right here. So that would be Effect, Punch, Copy, Paste, or I've got mine as Command 9. And that we would say OK for Punch, Copy, Paste. All right, now we're going to start a new file. Command N or go to Audacity, File, New File. And first we're just going to paste in that few seconds, not punch paste, just regular paste. Edit, paste, or Command or Control V. All right, so we've got almost 5 seconds of room tone here. Let's just look at it in spectrogram view, make it a little bigger. All right, now I'm going to go back to the beginning. I'm going to scroll out here. I'm going to zoom out. I'm only going to do 5 minutes of room tone because we're doing a 5-minute sample. Again, you would normally do like 30, 40 minutes if you have chapters that long. But I'm going to hold down the Shift button because that allows me to select. It gives me this little finger and go all the way over to 5 minutes and select that whole portion. Okay, 0 to 5 minutes. The whole thing's selected. And now I'm using Punch Paste, which in my case is Command 0. If you're doing 30 or 40 minutes, this is going to take a few minutes possibly to do your punch paste. So what that did is it took, and I'm going to do my join command, which again is edit, clip boundaries, join, or in my case, I've got it set up as Command J. So I don't have like, so it doesn't look like there's 2 different clips here. And look at this, that's a super, super even 5 minutes of room tone. And yours might be 30 or 40 minutes of room tone. Now, if you want to scroll, excuse me, if you want to zoom out a little or zoom in a little bit, just to make sure it really looks even, we want to make sure it doesn't look like it's like repeating anywhere. You know, like if your 5 seconds actually is not even, it's going to sound like a repeating 5 seconds, but it looks really even. So now we've got our file of room tone, and we would save that somewhere where you can easily find it. You might call it 00 room tone. Or in my case, I'm just going to say sample room tone because this isn't the room tone I would actually ever be using because I'm not using the right microphone. So I'm going to make sure I don't actually use it. Sample room tone is what I'm calling it. All right. We've got our file of room tone. You're going to use this on every single chapter. I'll show you how in just a minute. Got a little frog in my throat. I've been doing all this recording today, and I finished recording a book yesterday, so I've been using my voice a lot. All right, we can get rid of that first file of room tone we did. Don't even need to save it. Okay, now we've got our whole long file of room tone. Let's go back to our edited file, our edit file, which has already been mastered. All right, we've got some steps here. Got to follow them in order. First of all, we're going to select this whole track. Select it by clicking here. Command C or Control C for copy. We're going to click below. Command V or Control V for paste. Again, you can always use the copy and paste in your edit menu instead if you prefer. Let's make this copied portion about as big as the other one and turn it to spectrogram view. Now we have 2 tracks. If we played these together, it would be loud because it would just be playing the exact same thing at double volume because we've got it together here. I'll show you why we did that in just a minute. Let's go back to the beginning. Let's see how long our chapter is. We've got a 4-minute and 56-second chapter. I'm going to go to my room tone. I'm going to hold down make sure I'm at the beginning of my room tone. Just click that little back button right here. I'm going to hold down my Shift button to select and scroll over to 5 minutes. Command C for my 5-minute chapter. I'm going to paste in that room tone. That was copying it. It's Command C or Control C to copy. I'm going to click down here at the bottom below these 2 tracks. Command V or Control V to paste. We've got a track of room tone underneath all of this. Turn it to spectrogram view just for fun because I like spectrogram view. All right, now that we have all 3 tracks, we're going to mute the middle track. Don't mute the middle track before you paste in the 3rd track. The reason why is because if you only have 2 tracks and you mute one, the software thinks that you want the other track to be a solo track, which means it's the only one that you can hear. And that means when you paste in a third track, it will also be muted. We don't want our room tone track to be muted. So wait till you have all 3 tracks and then mute that middle track. So this is our mastered track with all of our sounds. It has all of our breaths. It has all of our funky little pops and clicks that our voices might make. It has all of the sounds in it. We're going to take out some of those sounds in this top track. And to do that, we're going to use something called a noise gate. A noise gate listens to know what is in between words and phrases, and it takes out the extra sounds in between words and phrases. So let's copy this first track. In fact, I'm going to go to a place where we've got more sounds. Okay, we've got some sounds here that sound terrible. Listen to this. I don't know if you could hear that, but I can hear it. It's a click sound. That's my voice making a click sound. We've got some sort of, I don't even think, that doesn't even look like a breath. That might have been me like rubbing my finger along my Kindle. Who knows what it was? It's just some funky sound. So we've got some weird sounds in between words. I always have lots of weird sounds in between words. Let's copy this whole top track. And we're going to do noise gate. That is in Effect down here at noise gate, or I have mine set up as Command 5. All right, here's your settings for noise gate. And this is all in the document here, okay? It's up further, but you've got the settings for the noise gate in the document. We're going to say gate, link stereo tracks, don't apply low cut filter. Gate frequencies above 0, level reduction -80, gate threshold -35, attack decay 250 milliseconds. Now I'm going to tell you something. If we just did this noise gate and left it as is, this would not sound good. It's going to cut out sounds that we don't want to cut out. It's going to cut out some F sounds at the ends of words, or H sounds at the beginnings of words, because it thinks that's extra noise. But we're doing a pretty extreme noise gate, because we have this copied track below where we can copy and paste back in any sounds that it takes out that we don't want it to take out. So this is a good way to take out lots of unwanted sounds all at once. It's just sometimes it throws out the baby with the bathwater. And so we have the baby down here so we can paste it back in. I probably took that metaphor way too far. But we've got all of our original sounds on the second track, so we can paste in anything the noise gate takes out that we didn't want to be there. Now, you may end up deciding you don't like noise gates and you don't want to do it this way. I will tell you, I still suggest you have a second track that's muted, that's copied from the original track, and you'll see why as in our next video. But if you want to manually take out breath sounds, manually take out all this stuff in between words, so that you don't have to add back in the sounds that it took out that you didn't want it to take out, you're welcome to skip the noise gate. This works really well for me, though. And again, it's one of those things that once you get used to doing it, it just makes my process faster. So let's click OK. Let's let it do its thing. Takes a few seconds. With a longer chapter, it takes longer. You see how all those unwanted sounds went away. How cool is that? You can also see the end of this word went away. That's probably going to be fine, but sometimes we're going to need to paste some of that stuff back in. Beginning of this word went away because it thought it was an unwanted noise. You can also play with your noise gate settings if you want. All of the room tone, look at that room tone that's here. There's a little breath or something there too. Look at all that room tone. All of it went away up here. Complete silence. That's why this track, remember, is muted. We don't hear this track. We don't hear that room tone. That's why we added a track of room tone underneath everything so that it all sounds as it should. Because a recording does sound weird without any room tone. All right, hope this is making sense, guys. Let's go back to the beginning here. We now have a noise-gated track, taking out noises we didn't want and some noises we did want. We now have a muted track with all of our noises still there, so we can paste in anything that we still want to be in there that was taken out. And that track is muted, so we can just take the sounds out that we want, but we don't hear most of them. And then we have our unmuted room noise track that goes underneath everything. Now we get to start editing. By the way, remember that we took time to make that sample room tone track, or that room tone track that's probably 30 or 40 minutes long in your case, or however long your chapters are. Remember, you only have to do that once. You don't have to do that more than once. That took a few minutes, but you don't have to do it more than once. We can even close that track because we don't need it anymore for this file. All right, we've got our file here. I usually put about 0.6 seconds at the beginning of a chapter, 0.6 seconds of room tone at the beginning of a chapter. That's because ACX likes 0.5 to 1 second. And if I do just 0.5, sometimes I accidentally do a little bit too little, so I just do 0.6. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm at 0.6 right here. I'm going to highlight all the way up to where my chapter name starts, and then I'm going to drag it down. Every time we take something out of that top track, we need to take it out of that middle track too. These tracks need to stay perfectly lined up. The next video will make it clear why. Every once in a while, I accidentally take something tiny out of the top track, and I accidentally don't take it out of the middle track, and I don't realize it till later. Sometimes what I do in that case is I highlight and copy the entire remaining part of the middle track. Let's say I'm 10 minutes into a 20-minute chapter. I highlight and copy that final 10 minutes. I paste it up, and I replace the rest of the top track with that middle track. And then I noise gate the top track, that portion that I pasted, I noise gate it again so that it's perfectly lined up. If you ever mess up and take stuff out of the top track and not the middle track, and you don't want to use undo, undo, undo until you get to the point that you did that, you can always paste the middle track into the top track, just the portion that you haven't edited yet, and then noise gate that portion again. So that, because these tracks need to be 100% perfectly lined up. If you take something out of the top track, take it out of the middle track. I know I'm saying that a lot. It's because it's really important. All right, so we've got our 0.6 seconds of room tone right here. We're going to take out the extra room tone. I highlighted it. There's two ways to do this. You can do what I just did, which is highlight and then drag it down, or you can highlight it and then you can click Shift down arrow. Sometimes you're going to need to do it that way. If you highlighted something on the middle track, you could do Shift up arrow and highlight it on the top track as well. All right, so we're highlighting the exact same amount on the top and middle tracks, and we're just clicking Delete on our keyboard. There we go. We've got 0.5 seconds, and let's hear how or 0.6 seconds of room tone. Let's see how our chapter name sounds.
1.
Sounds good. There's actually a little click on that one. We can get rid of that later, but I'm not going to show you how to get rid of clicks in the middle of words yet. That's something we're going to go over later. So we've got our chapter name 1, and I always put 1.5 seconds in between the chapter name and the beginning of the chapter. So again, we're just editing here. We've got we're starting, the chapter name ends at about 1.1. So we go to 2.6. It's just 1.1 plus 1.5 seconds, 2.6. Highlight it all the way to where it starts. This is just extra room tone we don't need. Pull it down here. So we're doing it on both tracks, and delete. Let's hear how this sounds.
2 years after the world ended, I was born.
I kind of think that break there is a little too long. I'm just going to take it out. I do a lot of stuff where I tend to record slow, and so I have a lot of breaks that shouldn't really be there. I'm just taking that out. There's another click here. Sometimes my voice is really clicky. I've gotten better at that since I recorded this. This is from a previous book. My voice is a lot less poppy and clicky than it used to be. I've learned to hear that while I'm recording and re-record. I've learned to do less of it, but my voice does tend to be kind of poppy and clicky. Now, excuse me, clicks and pops in your voice look like vertical lines. Now, if you're doing a B sound or a D sound, that can also look like a vertical line. You can't take out every vertical line, but sometimes, especially a little vertical line like this, kind of in the middle of another sound, that is a pop or a click. See if you can hear it.
I was born. I was born.
I can barely hear that one. With headphones, I'd hear it more. And there's even a click at the end of this word. The noise gate took out the end of my N, but it still sounds okay. If I felt like that little tiny click there was too much, here's how I would get rid of a click at the very end of a word. Really easy. I would just highlight that click with a little bit of time before it, and then I would fade out. So I'm fading out that click. Now again, fade out is effect, fade out, but I have it set up as command minus sign because that makes sense to me. And I'm going to click it again, command minus sign again. And we got rid of that little click. Let's just make sure it sounds okay.
I was born.
I was born. Good. And we can get rid of that other little click in the middle of the word later on our next video. That's going to require a little bit more finessing. I always do this little intro to each chapter. It's supposed to be a piece of another book that's being quoted in the book within the world. And so I always do a second and a half between that little snippet and the name of the book that I'm supposedly quoting. So basically, when you've got certain breaks in your audio, you just want those breaks to be the same length of time every time. If I have a scene break in the middle of a chapter, I always do that as 3 seconds. So I try, when in my recording, I try to have it longer than 3 seconds, and then I trim it down to 3 seconds when I'm editing. This needs to be a second and a half, so we're at like 5.8. We need to go to 7.3. And we'll delete it from both tracks. And let's keep going. We've got a breath here, so I think we're going to be able to use that. Here we go.
The first generation.
Okay, I didn't like the way that TH sounded. That's because the noise gate took a little bit of that TH off of the word the. I'm going to highlight it on my muted track. Command C, and then we're doing that shift up arrow. That highlights the exact same amount on the first track as we have highlighted on the middle track. Command V. We copied and pasted it, and we did it at the exact same point. This is why our tracks have to stay lined up, because if they don't, then I can't copy and paste something from the middle track back into the first track and have it be lined up.
The first generation. A memoir.
Okay, that's a normal, natural place for a breath to be. Honestly, I probably wouldn't put that breath back in. It doesn't really matter if there's a breath there, but it won't sound bad if we do. So I just want to show you how I do these breaths. My noise gate took that breath out. I'm going to copy it. So I'm going to highlight it down here, copy it. That's Command C, Shift up arrow to highlight the same amount, Command V to paste that breath back in. But breaths are usually too loud, and so we need to make it a little bit quieter. And that's where we use the amplify command. That is under Effect, Amplify. I have it set up as Command M. And I always de-amplify by 5 decibels at a time when I'm doing breaths. So -5. I can tell by looking at that, that's actually probably a good amount. Not too loud, but let's say I wanted it even quieter. I would use Command R. You could go back up to amplify and do the whole thing again, but I don't want to. Or you could go back up to Effect, Repeat. But let's just use Command R instead. Command R would repeat that command. Let's listen to that. So now it's been de-amplified it's been de-amplified twice, total of 10 decibels.
A memoir.
Yeah, I can barely even hear that breath now. I probably really would have only de-amplified it by 5, but that's fine.
A memoir by Leary Abrios.
Okay, my noise gate did a great job of getting rid of so many noises. See, there's all these noises we're not having to take out. You see all these noises? It's awesome. But this one, it missed. It didn't realize it was supposed to take out this part. So here's where we go back to punch, copy, and punch, paste. We want, every time we're editing a chapter, we want a little bit of completely blank noise on our punch copy clipboard. I'm going to highlight just a tiny bit, it's less than half a second, of a completely blank noise that's been noise gated. Command 9. If you don't use a noise gate and you're just keeping in the natural room tone, you would highlight some very some really like consistent room tone instead of silence. We're gonna say that was command 9 for punch copy. And say okay. Everything's set up where it should be. Say okay again. And then we select this part, which is just a tiny bit. It's like just over a 1/10 of a second. And those are some clicky sounds from in my voice. In fact, listen, let's see if you can hear it. I don't know how well you can hear it on YouTube, but I can totally hear it here. It sounds awful. I don't want those clicky sounds in my audiobook. So I do punch paste, command 0, or up here under analyze, under effect, punch paste, and see how it replaced that exact length of time with silence. I could have highlighted 17 seconds and it would have replaced it with silence. I could have highlighted 1/100th of a second and it would replace it with silence. That's the beauty of punch copy and punch paste, is it puts in that silence for exactly the length of time you need it to.
By Leary Abrios.
Okay, that's the end of my little intro to the chapter, and I always do 3 seconds before I start the actual chapter text. So we're at 11.9. I'm going to go to 14.9. Oh, I did not do quite long enough when I recorded. I'm at 14.6. So I'm just going to highlight like 3 seconds of silence here. I'm going to copy it, Command C. I'm going to click over here. Remember, we want to paste it into both of these tracks. So I clicked here. I'm going to do Shift down arrow so that it's going to paste it into both tracks that way. You see this line is on both tracks, so we know it's going to paste into both tracks. Command V, and now we've got it. We've got 3 seconds here, 11.9 to 14.9. Let's keep listening.
Darling, your crown is...
Now, if I was listening on my headphones, I might hear that as a click. It took out most of it. The noise gate did, but it didn't take out quite all of it. I'm just going to highlight it right there. And because it's at the beginning of a sound, I can fade in and get rid of that sound. So for me, fade in is Command plus sign or Command equal sign. It's the same button, the same key. And do 2 little fade ins. Get rid of that little sound.
Your crown is crooked.
I heard another little click. Man, I was really clicky on this chapter. We're going to have some good stuff to look at when we deal with clicks, with mid-word clicks once we get to that on the next video. Okay.
It's crooked. Nora turns to her.
Now, I'm just going to tell you, I think that's too big of a break between him talking and the narrating. And some of this is I've just gotten used to seeing what breaks look like and knowing how much actual space I want there. So I'm going to take some out. Whoops, delete.
Nora turns to her father. You're always telling me it's not a crown, it's a headdress. When it's just...
Again, too much space. I'm going to take some out. This is a lot of what I do in my editing is taking out silence.
When it's just the 2 of us, it's a crown. His brown eyes twinkled as he pointed to the band of gold around his head.
Oh, there's a nice little sound. There's a click that the noise gate missed. I've already punch copied silence onto my clipboard, so I'm going to do punch paste, Command 0. Yay, now it is silent.
His head. One day, you'll wear the real thing. Nora was on...
All right, again. Oops, I lost my space. It does that sometimes. Where am I?
To the band of gold around.
Okay, one day.
You'll wear the real thing.
You'll wear the real thing. There we go. Now, again, too much space here. Delete.
Nora was only 17. She wasn't ready to think about the day when she'd become an orphan and a queen all at once.
Okay, we've got another little extra click there. Let's punch paste over it. Yay, Command 0, and it is gone. Now, let's go back here. This was I think a semicolon in my text. I kind of like the thought of having a breath there as a nice little natural transition. So let's put that breath back in. We're going to copy it in that middle track, shift up arrow, paste it so that it's pasted in the exact same place, and then we're going to de-amplify it, Command M, -5. By the way, if de-amplification had been the last command that I had done on another breath, instead of doing this Command M, I could just do Command R and repeat. It would do -5 again, but we've done fade in since then, so it would repeat that if I did Command R. Command R always repeats the most recent effect that you did. It doesn't repeat things like copying and pasting. It does repeat punch pasting. It's whatever would be in the effects menu, it repeats. So it went down by -5. I think it needs to go down one more, so I'm going to do Command R to repeat that. Let's hear that.
She wasn't ready.
Now, in my computer speakers, I can't really hear that, but I would be able to hear it on headphones. I'd be able to hear just a slight breath. Okay, we already did this part. I was just going back.
All at once. That won't happen.
Okay, extra space again.
That won't happen for a long time. Straighten the headdress.
All right, we've got another breath in the middle of her dialogue. I like those breaths. I'm going to keep it. Command C, shift up arrow, Command V to paste it in. And I just now already did -5 on my amplification. So I'm just going to do Command R. That's the last effect that I did, and I'm repeating it. I'm going to do it twice. Sometimes in the middle of a breath, I'll see this little line because there's a little tiny click in the middle of the breath. And if I see that, I usually highlight it, shift down arrow to highlight it on both tracks, and then delete. There we go.
Straighten the headdress for me. He grasped it with...
And then again, we would take out that extra space. You're seeing a lot of the editing is to do with breaths and making sure that that we don't have, if you're like me and you tend to put in way too much extra space between paragraphs and such, taking those out. And then also editing back in anything that it took out, anything that the noise gate took out that you didn't want. To me, it's faster to add that stuff back in than it is to take out every little sound that the noise gate takes out for me. But you may end up deciding you don't like using a noise gate and you'd prefer not to do it that way, and that's fine too. Let's just see if there's anything else I need to go over here.
It scratched Nora's forehead, eliciting...
I would have taken out a little bit of that space there between sentences, but I won't do it here.
Forehead, eliciting a wince. Sorry, does it feel secure?
Okay, that secure sounded really kind of choppy. That's because the noise gate took out the end of his word. I'm just going to copy it, Command C, shift up arrow, Command V. Paste that back in. We're going to have a click here that we might have to get rid of later.
Feel secure. As secure as it gets. The headdress was crafted of fine silver. With depth.
Okay, I would take out some of this. Lots of times this is where I've stopped recording and started again, and I just end up with extra space. I could put that breath back in if I wanted to. I'm probably not going to, but I could. And again, I keep saying, oh, there's a click. We're going to have to deal with that click. Normally, I would deal with those pops and clicks right there at the same time I was doing the rest of my editing. It's just a different type of editing that I want to go into detail about next time, so we're going to handle it in a different video. But normally, I would do this all in one pass.
Silver, with delicate filigree extending high above Nora's head. She usually loved wearing it, but after weeks on the road, she had...
That would be another good place to put in a breath and to paste that back in. So, so we could do that. That breath I actually had to take down by 15 decibels because it was a pretty loud breath.
But after weeks on the road, she had pimples from the molded metal that rested on her forehead.
Hey, you got to hear about pimples in my book. Lovely. All right, so you can see how our editing process goes. When we finish editing a chapter, I always listen to the entire thing again and catch anything that I missed the previous time. And then I have some other stuff that I do at the very end, but I'll cover that after our next video, which is all about using EQ for editing. And at the end of that EQ video, I'll show you how I wrap up a chapter. I'm not going to edit this whole 5-minute chapter. It'll take too long, but that shows you how we do it. Let's go back to the beginning here because On the next video, I'll be showing you how to use EQ to deal with those pops and clicks and various other little things that our voices do that we don't want them to do on our final product. Hope this is helpful, guys, in showing you how to edit and how to use the noise gate to get rid of some of those unwanted sounds.